I think if you buy a Vitra product, you expect a certain degree of precision when it comes to how products are put together, material selection, tooling that has been used, the surfaces. I think all of that is part of what I would call precise.
Olá, sejam muito bem-vindos ao NIRINcast, uma série de conversas criada para ampliar horizontes, provocar reflexões e entender o que faz uma marca permanecer relevante em um mundo em constante transformação. Eu sou Daniel Skowronski, CEO da NIRIN, e é um prazer conduzir esse episódio inaugural da nossa primeira temporada, que traz como tema o Panorama Zürich, uma imersão em marcas, lugares e visões que nos inspiram a olhar para um futuro com mais intenção e significado. Essa temporada nasce a partir da publicação Panorama Zürich, criada pela NIRIN após uma jornada pela maior cidade da Suíça. Entre museus, estúdios, ruas e instituições, nós buscamos capturar aquilo que torna uma marca genuinamente relevante no contexto contemporâneo. E poucos lugares expressam isso tão bem quanto o Vitra Campus, um dos pontos mais altos da nossa imersão na Suíça. Por isso, para abrir essa temporada, temos o privilégio de receber Roman Ehrhardt, Global Chief Sales Officer, CSO da Vitra, uma das empresas mais admiradas do mundo quando o assunto é design, arquitetura e cultura contemporânea. A Vitra representa em sua essência tudo aquilo que o Panorama busca revelar: a simplicidade como sofisticação, a precisão como identidade e o design como linguagem de futuro. Mais do que uma fabricante de mobiliário, a Vitra é uma organização que pensa o mundo a partir dos ambientes onde vivemos, trabalhamos e nos conectamos. Nesse episódio, vamos conversar com o Roman sobre como essa visão é construída, quais valores suíços moldam a marca e como a Vitra se mantém relevante há tantas décadas, conectando o passado, presente e futuro com muita consistência e inspiração. Hi Roman, how are you today?
Very good, thank you. I hope you as well.
Great. Roman, we're going to start with the questions. So, who is Dr. Roman Ehrhardt?
That's a very good question to start with. Quite simple. I'm the Chief Sales Officer of Vitra, so I'm globally responsible for all our sales organizations. And as such, I'm responsible for Brazil too. Unfortunately, I've not been able to travel there for the last couple of years, but I have very good memories.
So what's your role in Vitra?
Well, I have the great honor to be responsible for selling our beautiful products. So I have a team in more than 20 countries who always serve our customers. So we sell products for homes, for workplaces, for airports, and for many other places. And so we are responsible to serve our customers in terms of selling, but in terms of service and maintaining the products as well.
And what has allowed Vitra to remain relevant and admired for decades, even in times of great transformation?
I think it's a very good question. I think at the end, I think we need to start with what is relevance. I think you build relevance if you try to stay away from short-lived trends and try to create something that lasts. And I think some of our core values have been always to have a little bit of an elevated view and not just produce a piece of furniture, but try to understand how people live and how people work and how this is changing, and then try to respond to that with products and ideas that add something new and try to support and try to improve that. So at the end, I think what we always try to do is to create something that is meaningful over time. And through that, basically, how do you do something like that? Through creating something that has a very good quality and a certain degree of longevity, so timelessness.
And what Swiss cultural values do you see reflected at Vitra?
That's a good question, Daniel. I think you need to tell me what you connect a little bit with Switzerland. I have sometimes the impression that different people connect different things with Switzerland. Based on my own experience, so I'm German. I was born in Mexico, so I had some time in Central America. And I always encountered that people see a certain degree of precision in the Swiss culture, that trains are on time, things are quite often on time, and that what you usually buy in terms of watches or other products have quite a good quality. And I think this is, I would say, to a certain degree, what we try to do as well. So we try to have products where we pay a lot of attention to detail, where you get a very good quality, and maybe that goes along with a certain portion of understatement.
And the Swiss design is connected with Vitra also, probably yes, but how do you connect Swiss design with Vitra?
Yeah, I think maybe I need to approach it from a different angle. I think Switzerland is a very collaborative, it's a very equal country, and you have a certain degree of patience. And I think if you would like to achieve what I just mentioned before, you would like to achieve really a product that is to a certain degree timeless, where you pay a lot of attention to detail, then you need to be very collaborative and you need to spend quite often a certain amount of time. So I think when it comes to time to market, which I think is quite an important factor in many companies, I would say that we quite often take probably a little bit longer than our competitors because of that. But I think that this is, to a certain degree, I'm living now for more than 10 years in Switzerland. I would say that is a reflection of the Swiss culture as well, that maybe things take a little bit more time, but therefore you get a very immaculate and a very good quality result.
Vitra aims to improve the quality of environments to transform people's lives. How does this mission come to life in daily practice?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think what we do, and I think the beginning of many processes that we have in terms of developing products or developing solutions, have something to do with observation. Careful observation, what are trends out there, how are things changing in terms of working environments, in terms of how people live, and what are through that basically challenges that have not been answered so far. So I think in our first discussion, I think I mentioned that change in terms of working environment, where if you look back into working environment 15, 20 years ago, most of the offices were white. The desk was gray and the chair was black. And if you come into working environments today, it's much more colorful. It's much more something that is between a home environment and a lounge environment. And this is something that we did already 15, 20 years ago. So the work environments that we created at that time had already that infusion basically of bringing this home feeling together with the workplace, because we have the impression that people are then most efficient if they really feel comfortable in their surrounding. So to a certain degree, I think you need to look at functionalities so that people have all the functionalities at the workplace that they require in order to be efficient. But on the other side, I think you have that more emotional factor that responds usually quite well if you're surrounded by an environment that is softer, that is lighter, and maybe to a certain degree a little bit more colorful and inspires people a little bit more.
Design is a very important issue for Vitra. What role does design play today as a tool for cultural transformation, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I think design, at least from my point of view, is always a way how the way how a society thinks about certain tools, objects, translates into design. So on the one side, it's a translation and a reflection of that. But on the other side, design always offers as well that opportunity to challenge a society and what society thinks. So it's on the one side, I think, a reflection, and on the other side gives you a way to challenge the current status, and through that basically to help a society to evolve into something new. So if you take, I would say, a very big challenge that we have at the moment as a society around sustainability. So for sure, design can help a lot in terms of helping a society to become more sustainable. And that is actually currently happening, maybe not to the degree and to the speed that is required, but I certainly see a change in the way how people perceive sustainable values when it comes to furniture and through other products.
Vitra have a lot of designers partnerships. So in your opinion, which are the main ones, the main partners of Vitra, and which one do you like the most? If you like one most.
That's a dangerous question. So,
it's a dangerous question.
I think we have a lot of very valued designers. I know quite a few of them personally. And I would not make a differentiation who is the most important one.
Okay.
I think we had the great honor, let me say it like that we worked together with a lot of great designers when they even started basically with their industrial design. And we were influenced by many of our designers. So I think for sure, if you look at the legacy of Vitra, is very closely connected to Charles and Ray Eames. And I think a lot of the quotes that, especially Charles Eames, that were published, I think are still quotes that go around our company. However, for me, it's always quite important not to reduce our mission and our history to that. I think there were many other designers, like Noguchi, for example, like Jean Prouvé. I think you asked me about which is my favorite designer. So if I would have to choose a piece of a designer, I would definitely choose one of Jean Prouvé. Mm-hmm. I love the collection as such. I love the quality, the timelessness, the material selection, many different aspects of that collection. But there are a lot of contemporary designers as well. Baba Oscaby, for example, and we always tend as well to Antonio Citerio. So now you're bringing me to that point that I'm repeating all the names, and that was exactly what I wanted to avoid. But I would not maybe distinguish them. I think all of them influence a lot how we think, and I mentioned before that collaborative approach that we have to work, and we collaborate a lot with our internal teams. But for us, the external designers, the authors, how we call them internally, are a very important ingredient in the Vitra soup, if you want to call it like that.
Consumers right now, they are searching more for old design or the legacy design that you have at Vitra, or the new ones. There is a percentage of sales that you could share with us, or what's the role right now?
Very cautious was publishing figures, but I can say the following. I think for sure, we call them the classics. So these are our historical designs. They still amount to a large proportion of our sales. However, if you look at the trend year by year, then our contemporary collection is growing every year, which I think is quite normal. I think the challenge in our days is much more to create today the classics of tomorrow, right? So I think that is something, and if that would be so easy, then probably everybody would do it. But I think whenever we bring a new product to the market, our aim is always to create something that lasts and hopefully becomes a classic in 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Which is your biggest market right now?
Our biggest markets are the markets where we are based. So it's Germany and Switzerland. So these are the markets where, you could say basically we're a household brand. So, but I would say because you were asking me about shares, so if you look into the share of both home markets, they are as well decreasing over time, which is a good sign because that means that we're growing somewhere else.
Vitra's branding is very consistent. How does the brand management process at Vitra work?
Yeah, that's I would not even say that it's really a process. I think it's much more of a mindset. It's a mindset where it is very much, I mentioned that it's very much about details, and it's about leaving away everything that doesn't matter. And therefore, we always try basically to look at our situation today and try to envision how do we want to change things, and then try to work on the details. And as long as, for example, when it comes to brand, you have done a good job, then you don't need to change it all the time, and you can keep that consistency.
We're going to talk again a little bit about Vitra Campus, because it's a really special place that we went. The Vitra Campus is a physical manifestation of the brand. What does it represent beyond architecture and design? And if you could also tell us about the architects that did the buildings, would be great.
The Vitra Campus is, I think, for everybody who works at Vitra, it's much more than a workplace or a production facility. It's basically the place where we feel at home, right? So, and why is it like that? Because it's reflecting not only great architecture or design, it reflects basically the way how we think and the way how we work. So I mentioned that before, but Vitra has a very strong mission, and that mission is, and that is maybe one of the main differences to other companies who have a very strong commercial mission. We had initially, that was the first generation of the family, a commercial mission. Afterwards, the second generation added a very strong cultural mission. And our third family generation added a sustainability mission. And all these three things are things that you can touch and feel when you visit the Vitra Campus. Along with, I think the other piece that I maybe did not mention too much is the whole mindset of experimentation and innovation. So if you want to stay and remain relevant, you need to innovate and adapt yourself. That only happens through experimentation. So the campus is a perfect place to experiment. So if you visit us, you see a lot of installations, a lot of things that we try and test. We see sometimes how people react to that. And if the experiment goes well, then maybe it leads to a product or to a service. So it's definitely around these kind of ideas about collaborations, exhibitions, and for sure architecture. And finally, I think it helps us as well to connect with the global community. So all the things that we do here attract a lot of visitors. So we have roughly every year more than 350,000 visitors at the campus every year. These are people who quite often love design, love architecture, and give us always the opportunity to connect with them and to stay in a dialogue with them. So that gives something back as well. And yeah, the architects you meant or you wanted to hear. So I think we started with Nicholas Grimshaw. Afterwards, we had the first buildings of Frank Gehry in Europe. We had the first building of Zaha Hadid. We're very proud of that. Our fire station is from Zaha Hadid.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Then we have the very renowned Basel architect Herzog de Meuron, and many others. So I think one of my favorite places, I think when you were here, that was installed already, is the garden from Piet Oudolf. So we don't only have buildings here, we have some great gardens as well. And yeah, we had the honor that Piet Oudolf transformed a piece of our campus into a very beautiful garden.
And how can you keep the essence of the brand? How can you keep this for a long time and don't lose it? Because for brands, it's easy to get away from the path. And do you have a rule or something that is the DNA of the brand or the company?
I think if you ask me personally, I think a lot has to do how strong your values are. So how strong is your mission? How strong do you live your mission? And this is something that I worked for different companies before I joined Vitra, and I never experienced a place where we live our values as strongly as here. We repeat them, and they really guide us in our daily work. And this is around what I mentioned already. So looking into the details, try to create something with a very good quality, maybe sometimes spend a little bit more time, but ensure that the outcome is really perfect. And that goes along with the need and the requirement to innovate yourself, because you only stay fresh and you only stay I would say, interesting as a brand if you constantly adapt and innovate yourself. So I would say we have these values around how a Vitra product should look like, or how a Vitra solution should look like at the end. But the ways on how to achieve that, they stay fluent. So sometimes we test new materials, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We work with the whole digital field. So I think I would see ourselves as being quite front runners in terms of digitalization in the furniture industry. So this is something we're experimenting as well. But whenever we do something, we always try to care a lot about the final outcome, but stay curious and experimental on the way there.
Where do you find this freshness for the brand? Of course, you have a lot of designers and people who are who has to do it. But where do you search this freshness? Where do you find this freshness?
Yeah, I think there are different ingredients. I think you mentioned already one very important one, that's working with external designers, authors who bring in certain ideas. I think that's definitely one element, that you stay open for the outside world, that you don't try basically just to do everything yourself. The second topic is around observation, so that you really observe what's going on, how are things changing, how are things evolving, and try to come up with solutions then with our internal teams and with the external designers in order to create something new. Again, out of my personal reflection, I would say we have great people here at Vitra. So I think maybe the fact that we are quite in our industry, within the design sector, a renowned brand helps us to attract talent that is not only talented, but extremely driven. So we have a lot of people who burn for the brand and who love to work for the brand. So, and I think all these ingredients together probably help us to achieve that.
Companies have different moments in their lifetime. What have been some of the most challenging moments in Vitra's history?
I think you mentioned already one. I think one which was for sure a moment where we entered that phase of where you have to rethink whether you start with exactly the same approach that you had in the past or you do something new, was our fire that we had at the campus in 1981. So afterwards, we were in that status where we had to rethink, do we just rebuild everything, normal factory campus, or do we approach a different way? Which at that time, I think there was, in our times, I think everybody's talking about a campus. If you talked at that time about the campus, then you talked about the university. So at that time, it was quite a new way of approaching the topic. And I think that decision led us to be seen in a different way from the outside world, but helped us as well to redefine ourselves, ourselves as not just being a company that tries to produce a piece of furniture, but tries to create something that helps with design to improve the way how people live or how people work. So it helps for sure in the transformation of the company. Another one, which was, I think, quite important, was the pandemic. So COVID. I think COVID was a challenge internally because it changed completely, like for many other companies as well. It changed the way how we worked together with teams. But we are a company where the office plays a very important role, right? So we are like the campus, like all our offices. I was at that time the managing director of Vitra in the UK. So our showroom there was a place where everything was happening. And then if you from one day to the other not able to bring people together anymore at your workplace, again, you have to innovate to a certain degree yourself on how do you work and how do you deal with this. And on the other side, workplace is quite an important part of our business. So it helped us as well to come up with new ideas, new concepts around how to respond to this new way of working that we then try to cultivate as well among our clients. So I think that was for sure, I think, a second very important moment in our history.
And how about the sales during the pandemic? Sales went down, stay the same, went up, because people during the pandemic, they had to stay at home. So they probably invest more on their homes. So what happened with the brand?
You're already answering your own question. Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. So on the one side, we had a very, very boost in our home part of the business. So we had a lot of people who had to stay at home and spend their money rather on their home furnishings instead of traveling or a new car. But then at the same time, we had a more difficult time in terms of workplaces because most offices were closed. And when companies were going back, they at the beginning didn't really know what to do. But then I think in the second step, then after the pandemic, home were starting to become a little bit weaker because people invested a lot of their money basically already in the time of the pandemic. And then we had a lot of companies who were then rethinking the way how they work, and luckily approaching us to look for help. So and maybe sometimes that is quite important to mention as well. So we don't only produce furniture, but we have consulting and planning services. So we help clients to create their own workplaces with the help of interior designers, workplace consultants. So we had a lot of clients approaching us in terms of getting advice on how to bring people back into the office.
What does it mean to lead a brand like Vitra in 2025?
Yeah, I think there are the normal challenges that you have in our days. I think if you look into the newspaper, I guess you know what I mean, and it's the same regardless where you are. So we live in times where things are constantly changing, where you have to adapt yourself, and what was right yesterday might not be right tomorrow. So I think in these times, I think it's even more important that you're very well grounded, that you know what the values are, what the company stands for, that you keep your teams motivated, and then that you try to really take certain routes that don't really change completely in a few months' time. But I think we had that in our first discussion. I think you mentioned our global footprint. So, for example, if you decide that market XYZ is now your core market where you want to grow, then with all the things that are changing at the moment, it might be that in 6 or 12 months' time, you come to a completely different conclusion. So therefore, I think it's on the one side, staying flexible with all the things that you can stay flexible with. It's experimenting, it's trying a lot of things, but then always remain honest to yourself. And if things don't work, change it again. And I think that kind of open mindset is something that we try to cultivate within our teams. So it has a lot to do with trust, that you give people the freedom to experiment, but then have honest discussions, challenge each other. And if you see that certain things don't work or don't work because certain things in the environment change, that you then try to take a different route. So at the end, it's very exciting, I would say, at the moment.
Vitra is a really creative company. You create a lot of experiments and collaborations. Recently, you did a collab with Remova. Could you tell us about this partnership with Remova?
Yeah, I think we do this quite frequently. So usually I would say once a year that we talk with other brands. We look together into fields of experimentation where when it comes to materials, where it comes to usage, I think the product that we did together with Remova is a very nice example where I would say the expertise in creating something that is a piece of furniture comes together with something that looks like a suitcase. And that along with the usage of certain materials that are quite well considered and that help you to have some additional value in this little piece of furniture. But at the end, I think it's really about what I mentioned, creating something, an experiment, create something that helps us engage with our communities, and quite often talk to brands that come out of a completely different industry, because that is usually something that helps you to learn, right?
Great.
And therefore, yeah, we have these collaborations with designers, we have these collaborations with other companies, and we love doing that, actually.
What catches Vitra's attention when you look at Brazil? And are there Brazilian collaborators, architects, or designers who have inspired Vitra or contributed to its story?
Yeah, I think at the end, I think I didn't mention that, but we have a very international workforce. So we talked a lot about Swiss culture, but I have a couple of colleagues who come from Brazil, and they basically add a certain degree of that vibe and the energy that you guys have over there. And that sometimes helps as well in the Swiss environment. But leaving that aside, I think at the end, I think it has a lot to do with the colorfulness of, for example, Latin American art that influenced some of our fabrics in the past, some of our products. So I think if you would clearly go there into our archives, I would say for sure you will find some immediate results of the Brazil culture as well there.
Have you been to Brazil?
Yes, I've been to Sao Paulo.
Sao Paulo.
Roughly 15 years ago, yeah. But you can invite me. I would look forward to come back.
You are already invited. Roman, what advice would you give young professional who want to build a brand that makes a real impact in the world?
I think maybe just relating to what I said already, I think the values are quite important, that you define certain values for yourself that have a certain degree of relevance to the people you talk to your community that you have in front of you. Ideally, it differentiates yourself to a certain degree from other brands. And then it's about staying very close to these values. I think you mentioned that already, that many brands sometimes lose their connection to their core values. And I think that is usually, I think, from my point of view, quite a big risk. And then I would say a piece of personal advice is to surround yourself with excellent people, ideally people that are better than you, and that you're allowed to speak up and to challenge you. I think then usually good things happen.
Great. The last question is a little bit hard for you, I think, as I start. And I ask you about the piece of design that you preferred at Vitra, or an architect or a designer. So which Vitra object would you take home if you could only choose one?
Yeah, I think I mentioned already the designer. I had now a little bit of time to think about it. I would choose basically the standard chair of Jean Prouvé. Because on the one side, it's a very timeless product. It's extremely honest in terms of design and the materiality. And it was truly innovative when it came out in terms of material selection. It was a modular product already at that time. It was demountable. And maybe, which is something that is emotionally nice as well, it served a social purpose. It was not done something as a luxury product. It was designed at that time for schools and for hospitals, which I think is quite a nice part of the history as well. So I would choose the standard chair.
And to close our conversation, how do you see the future of Vitra?
Well, based on my role, I have to be very optimistic, but it's honestly speaking quite easy for me to be like that, because I think if I look into, I would say, I mentioned that at the beginning, we need to look into how the life of people is changing in terms of work, in terms of their home furnishings. And I personally think that the whole topic of sustainability plays a very important role, many different facets. I usually use the example of circular furniture. So when I started with Vitra, was roughly 10 years ago, if you approached a client and asked him whether he would be interested in buying a circular, so a used product, a refurbished product, he would probably look at you and ask you whether you're right because somehow it was completely unusual that a client who has a certain budget would buy a used product. In the meantime, I think whenever we have our project discussions with our clients, we have an increasing requirement for refurbishment. And this is something that on the one side comes out of sustainability reasons, less out of economical reasons, but much more because people don't want to throw products away, don't want to throw things away. And if you imagine now living in a world, now imagine 5-10 years from now, where it's less about buying new things, but much more about buying things that are timeless, that have a very good quality, that you can repair, that you can keep, that you can pass on, then I think this is a very good world to live in as a person, as a private person, but it will be, I think, a good environment for Vitra as well.
Roman, thank you for joining us and for sharing the vision and thinking behind a brand that continues to shape global conversations in design, architecture, and the way we think about the future.
It was my pleasure, Daniel. Looking forward to hopefully meet you soon in person.